This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again the famous Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck.
Thank you.
I know you're going through a difficult time in your life. You just have to face these problems. The electoral cycle didn't produce what you hoped it would.
You keep bringing up, old wounds.
I know it's it's purgative sometimes just to get this out in the open in front of our TV audience.
Thank you.
That you've come through the problems with the vice presidency. There's still hope. I will await developments, and I hope if something happens, you'll appear on our TV show. And
I've already promised. This will be where I announce it. Let our
audience understand what's happened here. Okay. On that note, you'd have to be blind, deaf, and dumb right now in Georgia to not appreciate the fact there's an extraordinary senatorial election underway now. So we have just the most extraordinary amount of publicity out there, efforts, door knocking, emails, letters, tremendous amounts of attention all across the known world and what's happening in Georgia. And maybe we could discuss that a little bit. And I'll start off by throwing you a little pitch here, pretty softball. Why is this election important?
Well, there are a couple of different points of interest about it, at least a couple. The first, of course, is that there's not one but two senatorial elections, that in a normal year in any given state, you'd never have more than one senatorial election because the seats are staggered. But because our former Senator Johnny Isakson had to resign his seat due to health issues about a year ago, and Kelly Loeffler was appointed to fill that seat out. We've now got two elections going on for Isakson / Loeffler's seat, and of course for David Perdue to succeed himself potentially. So that's one level. The other level is that depending on which way these two seats go, then technically you could see either a Democratic majority in the United States Senate or a Republican majority in the United States Senate. And the reason that is important is because when the new year rings in, the Democrats will control the House of Representatives, although with a slightly less margin than they have got this year, rather surprisingly to them. And the Democrats will control the White House. And so the way these two Senate elections go will determine whether or not we have what is called a divided government. If the Democrats win control of the Senate, then they've got the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and can pretty much carry out whatever legislative agenda they want if there's party cohesion.
Well, that's a good summary of the situation we have, and it would appear one particular branch of government wasn't mentioned, and that's the judicial branch, and so that's still, if it's fair to say, in Republican hands, though that would be a bad turn of phrase. Chief Justice Roberts doesn't like that turn of phrase, and indeed, I don't either. I'd rather have, as best we can make it, a neutral court, but that's that just looks at issues. But because the court has turned into a policy-making branch of government, that's an issue that's out there also.
Well, I would.
Am I wrong on that? Okay.
The courts always make policy. They just, in some generations and in some judicial philosophies, they are more upfront about the fact that that's what they are doing. So, but I think that's the subject of an entire episode.
Well, I won't overkill it about this extraordinary sense of checks and balances, then we can get back to Georgia. But it would appear that the power the court can possess is extraordinary because they say that law or executive decision does not comport with the Constitution. Thus, they can basically stop almost anything. They really have tremendous power.
Yes.
And the power has been expanded by their efforts at, I guess I'll say, policy making. I mean, they have no reluctance to opine on, you name it, whatever it is. So that would appear to be in Republican hands. Additionally, the state legislatures, I know you're not going to like that turn of phrase, but that's what the Democrats think, and I would say that, and that might be a commonly perceived situation.
Well, let's expand it a bit more. It's not just the Supreme Court that we always focus on the Supreme Court, but the fact is there are well over 100 lower courts, and the Supreme Court gets all the glory, but there are constantly lower court federal judges, district judges, Court of Appeals judges, specialized court judges, who are constantly coming and going. They're coming in, they're retiring, they're resigning. And you're absolutely right that if the Democrats get control of the Senate, the filibuster by now seems to be a thing of the past. And so you would see a steady stream of Democratic judicial nominees coming from the White House, and they would routinely be approved. And yes, their philosophy would tend to be more activist, and that's the word I would tend to use instead of restraint. So if the Republicans, on the other hand, manage to hang on to the Senate, which will be determined by Georgia to steer us back on course here, then a lot of those nominations might be frustrated.
Well, I mean, I sort of wanted to make the case that we have the divided government in some ways because of the Supreme Court, and also because of the number of state legislatures that are in Republican control and state executives. There's still a lot of ability to checks and balances are still in place. Now, the ultimate check and balance would be if the Senate could basically block any kind of legislation or actions that would be to the left, and the idea that would be the situation we have. And the idea, to go back to my comment here, is that the Democrats seemingly plan a substantial rejigging of America. I mean, it's not a small ambition they have, and particularly on the left wing of the Democratic Party. This cannot stand. This country is in terrible situation. The only way to save it is to really just take a sledgehammer. I'm speaking in an extreme fashion, but this is my sense of the situation. If they were unchecked with this sledgehammer, they would really transform the country, its institutions, the power dynamics of the country, the immigration. Just go right down the litany of things that could happen. And so it appears that this extraordinary transformation would be held in check to a large degree by these two senators that are up for grabs in Georgia. And this is a very unusual situation for the state, having this much cachet in national and world politics. In a way, right now, all the citizens of Georgia have this extraordinary responsibility right now to cast their ballots in this forthcoming election, and how it turns out would have a profound effect on the dimensions of the country and indeed the world. And I can't recollect a situation when so much of the world situation depended on Georgia voters.
Well, I would say that there is a touch, not a lot, but a touch of hyperbole there for a couple of reasons.
Not altogether bad, right?
I think the first reason is that I think let's say for a minute that the Democrats do win control of the Senate, that both Loeffler and Perdue are defeated. Yes. And so that gives the Democrats, I think, maybe, there's just been a recent change by one number, so I'm thinking about, but I think that would give them control by 52 votes. I'm not sure.
Well, I think my understanding is that it would be 50-50
with Kamala Harris being the tiebreaker.
Right, with the vice president being the controlling vote.
Yes.
With the other caveat that a senator mentioned, West Virginia says, well, I won't let anything too extreme happen, if you can believe that.
Yes,
but
well, so
you might not believe it.
But let's say that happens, and so the Democrats have at least nominal control. I think there's still a couple of hurdles. First of all, would be there have been rumbles of a civil war within the Democratic Party itself, And what you were referring to, and it certainly has been said, and it's coming from the younger Democrats, members like the Squad, for instance, Ilhan Omar, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and they don't really have a lot of party loyalty. As a matter of fact, Donna Shalala, who was, I believe, Secretary of Education under Obama, I can't quite remember, but she recently in Florida, while running for, I believe, governor of Florida, described herself as a socialist, as a
Sure,
practical socialist.
of course.
So I think there still are more moderate Democrats out there. I mean, Biden has marketed himself as one. He's what passes for a moderate Democrat. If you look at the positions that he's filling them with the old guard, the moderate Democrats.
Well,
so,
not altogether. Not altogether.
to a large degree, yes. A lot of them are Obama retreads. So I think that the people who really want the transformative stuff, making Puerto Rico a state, making D.C. a state, increasing the size of the Supreme Court and packing it, they would have a lot of resistance, or at least some resistance, within their own party. And secondly, if you focus in on the Senate, all it would take would be one or maybe two senatorial defections towards the moderates to do that. Now, of course, we can't be certain that that will happen. Maybe the left wing will win the Civil War, both in general, in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. You could throw in an extra wild card. What if Joe Biden, who is going to be the oldest president we've ever had, doesn't make it, or has to be judged, or judges himself to be lacking in capacity in the first year or two? And so you get Kamala Harris, who I think is certainly much more aligned towards the left wing of the Democratic Party. And so you don't have the possibility of a veto of anything extreme. So I'm not saying that what you're saying is beyond the realm of possibility. It's certainly possible. I'm not sure how probable it is, but if Loeffler and Perdue both lose, then that opens the door to that possibility.
Well, I mean, we mentioned hyperbole, not
Yes.
altogether a bad thing, but it appears to me there are many ambitions of the Democratic Party that are transformative, and a number of them, it would appear to me, would be acceptable to the rank and file of the Democratic Party. For instance, changing the tax arrangements, maybe forgiving student debt. I'm naming a few here. Really enforcing, almost affirmative action for around the country. And it's pretty interesting, for instance, the NASDAQ, there are 3,500 companies listed on NASDAQ, and the idea is, as I understand it, they've submitted a plan to require that every board of those 3,500 members have at least one female on, but that one female, and then also a minority person or a person of whatever the sexual thing is, I can never remember, but whatever, the gay people, yes, and whatever so. They want. So that's two people that would be forced upon 3,500 companies.
Well, my understanding is that's not coming from the government. That's coming from a private entity, NASDAQ itself.
Right. My understanding on this is they've submitted this to the government regulatory body that would approve it. And so what could happen, a whole host of people could be there. And the prescriptive power the Democrats would possess to basically do, I really have the sense that they really want to swing the country to the left. It's true enough, there may be, quote, what you would call moderates out there in the Democratic Party. I'm not sure that label really comports with their viewpoints. And you could ask the question about the two Democratic senatorial candidates in Georgia. They, from what I can see, they're pretty far to the left. I mean, and it would be difficult for me to believe they wouldn't go with party leadership on whatever ideas that came up. I just don't know. You might trust their moderate label more than I would.
Well,
I'd put it that
when
way.
I use the word moderate, I would say that the entire Democratic Party is substantially to the left of a true spectrum of left-right. But I'm using the terms that they themselves would use.
Yes.
And There are a couple of things going on here. That obviously there are a lot of members of the House of Representatives and from the Senate who are in safe seats. They really do not have to worry about realistic challenge from the other party. But not all of the seats are safe. And once again, this blue wave, this much vaunted blue wave that we were supposed to get in November, it didn't happen. The Democrats almost astonishingly lost seats in the House of Representatives, which means that the remaining Democrats in the incoming House of Representatives, the ones who are not from clearly safe districts, are going to have to be looking over their shoulders. They're going to be, if they embrace a truly radical agenda, they're going to have to go home and defend that, starting within about a year from attack by a party that just got the second most number of presidential votes in American history. And they got to be thinking about that.
Well, not to overkill it, but I think traditionally what happens when extraordinary changes occur in the political process, they happen right away because the politicians know, well, the first 90 days, we can put whatever legislation through and the voters will not remember it. 90 days, and then next year or whatever, I'll say I'm for balanced, whatever it is, I'm for balanced budget or whatever. And then in the next electoral cycle, they'll then swing back toward the middle to preserve their...
Well, for smaller things, that's certainly true. But for big epical changes like let's add 10 seats to the Supreme Court, and remember that's why the House of Representatives has such short terms. So the voter will be less inclined to have forgotten by that time. And in the House of Representatives, you're always running for re-election. So, and once again, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I do envision a circumstance in which these things come to pass, but I don't think we can say that it's going to happen as a fait accompli if you lose these two seats.
Right now, Bucky, I'm going to shock you by saying this, but the politicians have other objectives and temptations other than staying in their seat, their political position. And so they certainly can be tempted in many ways to, the assumption is, well, you may lose your seat, but we're going to take care of you. And my understanding is that that's a common story in Washington, is that, well, we need your vote, Senator or Congressman. I'll probably lose my debt. Well, guess what? We've got just this great sinecure for you. What would you like? Well, I think I'd like to be president of a university. Well, we're going to take care of that for you. Well, I think I'd like to make $1 billion. Well, we're going to put you on the board of such and such. Well, I think I'd like to, whatever it is, be ambassador somewhere. Well, that's great. We'll have an ambassadorship arranged for you. So my comment is they're in a really existentialist situation where the fate of the country is at stake and people strongly believe the country should change its political dimensions. I'm not so comfortable that the idea is that the desire to stay in office is enough to persuade people in the legislature to go with the voters' will. They may, if you take my point, they could be tempted in other ways. Well, I don't want to sail the ship into too troubled waters, but maybe I can get back a little. You may have a comment, and we'll get back.
Well, yeah, I mean, these people are drawn to power, and once again, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm not saying that you can categorically say that this is what's going to happen. Kelly Loeffler does not need to work another day in her life, but she is drawn to that position for some reason. Why has Joe Biden, who has made millions as a quote-unquote public service, he served in the Senate he's been up there for 40 years. So yes, I don't think you can downplay the reward of the office itself. So.
Well, humans are strange creatures. And I'll give you the point that yes, people have their druthers, but I'm making the comment for many people, it's sort of a scale here, and you just keep dropping things on the scale. I'll do this for you, I'll do that for you. It's the temptations could change their vote, and I think that's a common story in the Washington world. But I'll take your point.
Yeah, I can see that.
So now we've sort of run around the track a little bit about the importance of the election. one of the things that disturbs me a little bit is the way this extraordinary important election is happening. And it looks like, as far as I can tell, each of the parties have raised just boatloads of shekels. Huge, like Scrooge McDuck, I mean, whatever, the money pit. I mean, the amount of money that's pouring into the state is an extraordinary amount of money is coming in. And the money is being used, I would say, by both sides for sophistry. So it seems like what's happening.
No, you mean, wow. You mean they're not really getting to the nitty gritty and telling us like it is?
Oh, I'm glad I know it's hard to shock you.
No, I mean,
the usual suspects, right? Well, I mean, just to continue with it, yes. And so what I'm saying, I'm going to then sail the ship in this direction. So the story is, it's almost a Goebbels kind of repeat. Only give people like 5 sentences. That's as much as they can handle. 5 sentences, go out there, repeat those 5 sentences over and over and over again.
I'll give you 3 words. From the gubernatorial election in 1982, Joe Sam Harris, who was in a very crowded field.
Joe
Frank Harris.
It's easy to, we're part of the double name group. We have an extensive club in this part of the world.
Joe Frank Harris, who was part of a very crowded field, hired an extremely astute campaign advisor. I believe his name was DeLoss Walker, but his entire message for months and months and months: no tax increases. That was
I get that. That was it. Yes.
And he was up against former mayors, former congressmen. It blew them all out.
Right.
No tax increases.
Well, I mean, let's discuss that a little bit. So, if in fact this election, this extraordinarily, we sort of made the point, there's such a huge, important thing that we've all got this privilege of determining the fate of the world in some ways. It's huge. It's a big deal. And the conversations that are taking place, I don't really see them too much. Instead, I see almost this Goebbels thing on both sides. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, that's enough. And people are staying on these message points, I guess you'd say that. And if there's talking points, and that's often said, well, that's what's going on. If there's ever an example of talking points that are out there on both sides, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Whatever the entanglements of the individual arrangements are, it just doesn't get there. And it looks like what's going to happen for the next, I don't know, how much do we have? About another month of this? For about the next month, we're just going to just get these 3 words over and over and over again. And what the candidates in the respective parties are doing, their major issue is raising money. So they're out basically just trying to collect money. So the candidate is out, I'm going to get a lot of money, however you do it. I have a big party, I'll do this, I'll go to Hollywood, I'll whatever. My brother-in-law is headed out to, I'll make a joke, to China to get some money, or to wherever, I don't know, France. Where anybody in the world that wants to pump money into this election can do it. And it was said, just to continue on this, well, the elections are being influenced by foreign governments, and they're going to try and confuse things. Well, the foreign governments have methodologies to put money into these different political parties. That's never discussed, never. One reason is that they have a lot of dual citizens out there, lots of dual citizens. And it's very easy if you were, I don't know, let's pick a country. I'll pick one. What's Paraguay? A nice country, a very nice country. Paraguay, we want to do something. We've got some citizens of Paraguay. We're going to find it. We'll do some kind of deal where the government gets some kind of contract with you. And then we send you $10 million. And this $10 million we're going to invest in the American political process in Georgia, I'm making this up, to influence things for Paraguay's benefit. So the intrinsic possibilities of corruption in this scenario are extensive. And it's been said, well, the voting wasn't fair, or the extra votes are put in. The question I ask is, are the voters in some ways, the messages they're receiving that are being powered by huge amounts of money, these messages have been put out there to influence them, and the way the the pros from Dover are the people that are arranging these messages, the same people that sell toothpaste or whatever, new cars. They're the people that are putting these messages together. They're tried out, and and then the messages go out, and the voters are impacted by that. And in some ways, giving the voters the chance to really think for themselves would be a useful thing. And I'm not sure that's happening. I don't know. Is there a real discussion about the issues? That we brought them up a little bit. I mean, is that really happening anywhere in this electoral cycle?
Well, it's up to the individual voter to go out and do that. And I mean, that is the basic principle of what we could loosely call democracy. This is why we educate people. But the problem is the average voter's got a life. He's got too many things going on, especially during COVID-19 and people losing their jobs and cutting into their bank accounts. They've got too much on their plate to worry about their civic duty. And I mean, I hate to be dismissive like that, but that's the way they're going to say it. It's a weakness of democracy.
Well, let's discuss that. So it would appear that there would be a substantial possibility that the shrewdest advertising person that has the most money can influence people enough to sway the election.
Of course. I mean, I can take this back to...
were you shocked when I said that?
Oh, yes. One that occurs to me right away is the presidential election of 1896, which was really the first election in which you saw the going out and seeking of the big campaign war chests. Mark Hanna was...
Cleveland boy, I think.
No, Mark Hanna was President McKinley's...
I know, but I think he was from Cleveland as well.
And he outraised the Democrats 10-1, and surprise, surprise, the Republicans won. But
it doesn't always work. I mean, it doesn't always work. It's part of the equation. So hopefully, other things will be there, and there'll be a lot of serious discussion over kitchen tables. What I'd like to see happen about the merits of what's going on.
But unfortunately, our discussion has to start winding down. So this is something we would need to consider in another episode.
And maybe we could discuss voting irregularities in at least the idea about what could be happening in January when the senatorial elections appear. We'll have a little conversation about that. Well, once again, Buck, it's been a pleasure to have you here with us tonight, and I hope that you're going to overcome this recent adversity you've faced with this unfortunate political response. But
the country knows where to find me.
It could be that you could seek an appointed office. I mean, you might be able to take a bus trip up to there and wait around, and maybe something could happen, right?
The spoil system strikes again.
Right. Okay. On that note, thank you for appearing, and we'll thank you a lot. We'll talk some more here.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. Endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.